In the world of medicine, where every decision can change lives, your peace of mind is crucial. This is where Pattern steps in. Imagine insurance made simple, fast, and personalized, just for you. With Pattern, you're not just getting disability and life insurance, you're insuring your future and protecting your greatest asset, your income. In the past 10 years, Pattern has transformed the way over 20,000 doctors secure their financial well-being. Discover the simplicity of securing your future at patternlife.com or click the link in the description. Welcome back to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring. On this week's episode, we have a guest host, so please be the same respectful audience you are for me and enjoy. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle.
So it's my privilege today to spend some time with Dr. John Chuck. Dr. Chuck has been a family physician at Kaiser Permanente in Northern California for over 30 years. And for many of those years, and this is why I've asked him on the podcast, for many of those years, he has been the chairperson of the Kaiser Permanente Physician Wellness Mission. He has led over 10,000 physicians at Kaiser Permanente in that mission. And I am proud to say that I have been one of those 10,000 doctors. His leadership in that regard has just been extraordinary. Dr. Chuck is professor of family medicine at California Northstate University. He's also the chief wellness officer at that medical school. In addition, Dr. Chuck has consulted with dozens of hospitals and healthcare organizations and medical schools in the arena of physician wellness. He's consulted with University of California, San Francisco, Stanford, UC Davis, American College of Surgeons, American College of OBGYN. I could go on and on for about 5 minutes with this, but welcome, John.
It's great to be here, Scott. We go way back. I love you as a friend and as a mentor to me and all things clinical and personal and professional. So I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Me too, John. I really have. And it's so good to see you. So let's get right down to it, John. When you're called to consult with a medical organization or a medical school, and I realize that every culture is different and you have to explore every culture, but can you tell us 2 or 3 strategies that seem to be more or less generic that might apply to most of these organizations, no matter what their culture? What 2 or 3 strategies of physician wellness can you help these folks with?
Great question. So I like to fancy myself as a good, generous listener. I think I learned that from people like you. I first asked my host about their points of pain and what they see the issues to be. And then I ask how they think I could possibly help them. And after I do some of that deep listening, I start blabbing away about things. But I would say in short, I think it's important for any organization to have leadership that publicly declares that wellness is a priority for their organization. It's very important that they say that and they write that, and that's part of the corporate message. If it's weaved into their mission statement, it's even better. And then if they have the heart and generosity to actually allocate some staff support and financial resources to support some programming, that's great. And after that, as you well know, I like to talk about the 3 reciprocal domains of wellness in any organization or group. And, we borrow this language from, Tate Shanafelt and others at Stanford. So those domains being the culture and the operations and the personal resilience habits. So as far as culture goes, as you know, the number one driver of trust and group efficiency and success is psychological safety, right? If there's not a culture of psychological safety, if it's not safe to talk about what really matters, then you're not going to move forward at all. So ideally, the leader would demonstrate that in her words and actions, and then you kind of go from there. The other thing that's important in the arena of cultural wellness is measuring wellness. So if organizations say they want to be more well, they need to measure wellness and then do something with the responses from their people. The second big category is operational efficiency. And I'd say in that arena, the main thing I like to advise organizations is celebrate your operational efficiency, your PDSA people as champions of wellness. Because when operations run well, everybody's happy and well. And the last arena of wellness, as you know, it's what most of us started with. It's all about the personal resilience habits. And I'm going to quote a former patient and recently retired UC Davis women's tennis coach, the great Bill Mays, former Stanford All-American. I had lunch with him the other day to celebrate his retirement. He said, well, John, my acronym for wellness, it's MEDS, MEDS. He goes, for my entire career, as a player and as a coach, I started with mindfulness, and then I did exercise, and then D stands for diet. He's been a vegan forever. You don't have to be a vegan, but be plant forward. And then S is sleep. So I'd say in personal resilience habits, I'd start with those things, maybe just offer some basic mindfulness courses. Mindfulness has tremendous power to change everything, even if external circumstances don't change at all. So the whole, Viktor Frankl, John Kabat-Zinn's secular pull out of Eastern meditative practice is so important. Just living fully present in the moment, like I'm enjoying this great moment. I'm not distracted by, regrets about the past or anxiety about the future. I'm fully into this great moment with you. So I'd say in the personal resilience category, mindfulness, exercise, good eating, those are all clear winners.
And I like what you said, John, about the leadership. It's like I have the feeling that a lot of these leaders they talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. It's like they're given a mission and they say, but when you say that these leaders have got to convince people that they're there for them. We had at Kaiser Permanente.
I think there's a fabulous business argument for promoting wellness in your people. At TPMG, we used to say that anytime we turn over a physician, it costs our organization anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million. And it creates tremendous inefficiency, and it really erodes at the culture and the continuity of care. So, if you just retain one physician, or you save one physician from burnout, or you improve one physician's performance, the financial returns are tremendous.
And John, you mentioned that celebrating success, the system's success, right? Can you give an example about how that might work when you go into an organization?
Well, as you recall from our regional meetings of the medical center wellness chiefs, I would always encourage every leader to send out a newsletter, a health and wellness newsletter. It's free. And you just tell stories about, your successes with pictures. And I think it's important for people within an organization to know that somebody, a designated person, is leading the wellness charge. There are successes. And the other thing that's important is if you're a wellness leader and you're developing a menu, even if it's a modest menu of programs, even when one of your people can't engage, this probably happened to you. You would get these thankful emails or text messages saying, Scott, I couldn't go to the pumpkin patch activity for families, but just knowing that it happened, makes me feel better. So you just have to keep all this front and center, just as we keep all the information, about access and service and quality outcomes. You're inundated with those messages, but what about sprinkling regular messages about successes and wellness? I think it's important. It builds enthusiasm and energy and team spirit. So it's free to share messages, the email era, and probably the younger, cooler wellness leads, they're doing it by TikTok or whatever, but I don't even know how to use those things, but those are also important communications channels.
So, John, I'm going to ask you a tough question, John. I would hear this all the time in our local wellness thing, is people would come up and say, hey, Abramson, I really appreciate your newsletter. I appreciate the mindfulness class. I appreciate the goat yoga and all that stuff. But, just tell administration, give me 2 less work-ins a day. Give me, an hour to do my inbox, and I don't need all your wellness stuff. What do you say to someone like that?
Okay, you froze during your question, so I'm not sure I heard all of it, but I think the gist of it was, you're doing all these things, yet my day-to-day work has not changed.
Yeah, it's like, if only I had 2 less work-ins a day, my life would be great. I would need you.
Okay, so something you've often heard me say is that changes in organizational culture and operations happen at a glacial pace. And when I say glacial, I mean you have to step back, 750 million years to see the thing move an inch. So that's just the way things work in large organizations. That being said, everybody who's involved in official designated...
John, I think you're freezing up.
Okay, but can you hear me still?
Yeah, I hear you now, but then you froze just there when you were giving your answer.
Scott, that's a really good question. And my answer to that is this. So in large organizations, improvements in culture and operations happen at a glacial pace. And when I say glacial pace, I mean you need to step back and wait 75 million years to see the thing budge, 1 millimeter. That being said, the possibilities for individual change are tremendous, right? So what I would say to those people is be patient, or actually be involved in the process of cultural and operational change. But the potential for you to change while none of the external factors changes is tremendous. And I will, quote Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, here this physician stuck in, Hitler's death camps. It's not that he and his fellow prisoners didn't advocate for improvements, like, hey, how about more food? How about some shoes? How about not having to work when it's freezing outside? But, Hitler wasn't so forthcoming with help. So what he says is, well, if I can't just change those things, I'm going to change myself. I'm going to change myself. I'm going to work to maintain hope. I'm going to work, to make the best of this horrible situation. And I think that most people listening to this podcast will know from their own lives, from their own personal experiences that, yeah, I'm not going to wait around for others to change. The power lies in me changing and responding to the stimulus by choosing a positively adaptive behavior.
John, you've often talked about gratitude. In making this personal change, what is the role of gratitude?
Yeah, I mean, gratitude is the welcome door and threshold to a much better you. Bob Emmons did this famous study at UC Davis where he gave gratitude journals to patients at the UC Davis Medical Center with progressive neurological disease. This is right up your alley, people with MS, things like that. And what he found is that in the intervention group that was doing gratitude journaling, after 21 days of consecutive gratitude journaling, their health outcomes and mood scores and the family and friend perception of them was superior to that of the control group that wasn't gratitude journaling. And then he received that $5.6 million grant from the Templeton Foundation to scale up the study to find out, hey, is this just true for people with MS, or is it true for healthy people, old, young, men, women, employed, unemployed? And personal friend of Bob's, and I see him around in Davis all the time. I said, Bob, how's the research going? And he always smiles and says, John, easiest $5.6 million grant in the history of grant receiving. Like he goes, we're scouring the world. We run the study in all these different groups, and the outcomes are always the same. Gratitude journaling always works. So, I mean, it has tremendous power, and it's really pretty much free. I mean, my personal practice is I wake up every day and say, I'm grateful for meaningful work and the strength to do it. I mean, to start out with that perspective and to move on from there. And then as physicians, I mean, you're just grateful to wake up. I mean, you could have died overnight. You could have had a widowmaker, you could have a pulmonary embolus, some sort of, I mean, a lot of things could have happened. Your spouse could have murdered you. I mean, whatever, but you woke up for one more day. And if you're lucky, you woke up continent of stool and urine for one more day. You'll choose to evacuate your bowel and bladder on the location and time of your choice. Like, these are all things to be tremendously grateful for. And it's not to say that all the stressors aren't there in your life, but if you step back and look at the grand tally of the blessings and the stressors in your life, the blessings far outweigh, the challenges, right? I mean, I once I heard on the radio this guy's response to people who said life isn't fair. His response was, yeah, if life were fair, you'd be living in sub-Saharan Africa, with no water or food. I mean, like, I think most of our listeners are living in the Western world, right? Like, you kind of drew the lucky ticket worldwide.
The lucky ticket is absolutely right. I took your advice on gratitude, and on my computer, whenever I open my computer and look at my computer, I have a little index card, and it says, I am so grateful today I don't have a toothache, because I've had a lot of toothaches in my life. And man, it's terrible. You can't eat, you can't talk, but man, today I didn't have one. It was a great feeling.
Okay, I have some comments about that. So my practice was, at Kaiser Permanente in Davis, and we have UC Davis. So I had a lot of professor patients. I had biology professors tell me, oh yeah, human beings were supposed to die in our 30s or 40s from dental caries and starvation, right? And I myself, just 2 weeks ago, a tooth extraction and a bone graft, and I'm being set up for a tooth implant or whatever. But yeah, I'm so grateful that I'm living in an era where that technology exists. I mean, otherwise I would just have this huge abscess in my mouth and pain, and I'd starve and die. So, and it's sort of like when people tell me, they share the bad news if they have this horrible medical condition. And I say, well, I'm really sorry to hear that. If you're going to have that condition, it's best to have it in 2024 rather than 1982 when I started medical school and we didn't know much about anything at all. There's always a positive take on everything. I'm not a Pollyannish, naive person. I think for me, as a physician like you, being fully aware of all the bad things that could happen, I sort of take the stoic approach of, well, I'm just grateful that all those bad things didn't happen today. And I just have this short list of bad things, right?
John, let me ask you now, I've heard you talk a lot about your dad and the influence, the kind of man he was. Tell us about your dad, John.
My dad, my late father, James, was born in Oakland and then moved to San Francisco's Chinatown. He had an older brother. Well, he had a brother named Loggy and immigrant parents. I think his father worked cleaning up in a butcher shop and his mom was a seamstress. Anyway, super smart kid. He went to Cal, Phi Beta Kappa, chose a career in the ministry and was the minister of the same church in San Francisco's Chinatown for over 4 decades, and also taught at a local seminary. But my father just loved God and he loved people. He was very interested and inclusive of people of other beliefs and faiths. He always told me, John, we're just all products of our environment. I grew up in Chinatown near a church. I became a Christian, but all these other people are growing up all over the world with their beliefs, and they're good people too. And at his memorial service, I was asked to make a few comments, and I was telling this young attorney about my dad, and this guy was good with words. I'm not so much. And he says, yeah, he goes, your father, he was convicted, but not convicting. I mean, he knew what he believed in, but not to the exclusion of everybody else's great beliefs and practices, right? So that was my dad. And every day, he was the guy who modeled waking up saying, I'm grateful for meaningful work and the strength to do it. And then he would just go, our church was a very social services oriented church in Chinatown. So took in a lot of immigrants, taught them English, got them housing and jobs. He was just a wonderful role model for me about how be grateful, don't complain, and try and get something good done for other people every day. Yeah, wonderful. And then my mother, can I tell you about my mother since we're talking about parents? So my mother was born in China, came to America. Her family ran a Chinese restaurant in Fresno. She somehow got through Stanford nursing school and some sort of government scholarship. And then she was a burn unit nurse at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco for most of her career. But she was just a very kind, loving person, minister's wife, raised the kids. And if you put my mother in a room of 100 people, within a minute, she would find the loneliest person there and be listening to his story and making him a sandwich. Okay, so when I was trying to choose a career, I wasn't good enough to be a minister. I'm not that generous and kind. I thought I'll be a doctor. It's kind of a combination of being my mom and my dad, right? Kind of a minister and a healthcare person. And so it was just a great fit. But I love my parents. They weren't preachy people. They just did things. They were not judgmental. They just loved the Lord, and they demonstrated that by loving other people. And that's what I've been trying to do.
And in your book called Pearls from the Practice of Life, I remember you mentioned what your father said at Uncle Arthur's funeral. And
yeah, this is great. Okay. Uncle Arthur was a solo practice general internist in Fresno, California. Went to Fresno State, somehow got through Northwestern Medical School, married Aunt Phyllis. Anyway, moved back to Fresno, solo practice internist. And at his funeral, he lived to a ripe old age, late 80s, something like that. And then his funeral, his interment was, in Fresno in the summer. It was just Fresno, if you've never been there, it's just this boiling hot Central Valley town. They grow figs and, grapes to make raisins. Anyway, what my dad said at the interment was, he said, the sad thing isn't that Uncle Arthur died. I mean, we all die. The sad thing would have been if Uncle Arthur had wasted the time that he had. And that was profound. I think I wrote in the book that if I had been on Twitter at the time, I would have posted that, and with hashtag truth, right? I mean, isn't that the truth? I mean, the sad thing isn't that we die, because we all die. So that's just part of the human condition. The sad thing is if in the brief life you have, and human life is brief. I mean, whether you die as a neonate or you live to 95, it's all brief in the context of the history of mankind. So you don't want to waste the time you have. And a lot of us, including myself, we waste a lot of time, right? Being anxious, having regrets. And it's not that those feelings aren't real, but you don't have forever, my friend. And you blink and it's over, right? So I think one reason I wrote the book is because you and I are taught about how to help people live long, healthy lives. We do extra reading on it. But then in our patients' lives and in the lives of our colleagues and family and friends, we see that certain people do it better than others, right? And I feel like those people who do that with certain perspectives and choices, they can serve as blueprints for the rest of us trying to lead our best lives. And so the book is 69 short stories about perspectives and choices that can help you lead your best life in the little time you have. And I wrote it because I was really saddened by seeing people into the last chapter of their life with great regret. And it's things like so many of us grow up with the misconception that, oh, it's all about recognition and fame and money, only to find at the end that that's not about that at all. I mean, after you've secured some basic things, it's really about investing in the deep relationships that bring you joy and meaning, right? Yeah. Relationship with yourself, your emotional life, a hugely important relationship with others, your social life, engaging with them for a cause greater than yourself. That's the ultimate beauty of work in life, right? And then your relationship with the spiritual, the divine, the eternal, which for many people is the main driver of their belief system and existence, right? So anyway, at the very least, people should consider what really brings true hope, joy, and meaning. And it's all about the relationships. And so the book is just sort of, it has a bunch of stories like that, real life examples of people making good choices.
I really got something out of the book. It really was inspiring about these stories about how people could enhance those relationships and the examples. John, let me ask you, just, growing up the son of a pastor, and a minister, did you feel any particular pressure to be good? I mean, couldn't you be naughty or well? I mean, that must have been tough.
I must have been super naive because, first of all, I was the youngest of 4 kids, so the expectations are low of the youngest, right? Like I was a mistake. I think the first 2 kids in our family were like Irish twins, like, I don't know, like 11 months apart or something. Then my sister, and then I was born 3 or 4 years later, so I'm pretty sure I was a mistake. So expectations were low, and I actually did not. So much later, I think I was already working as a physician, or a family friend who had grown up with. He asked me that same question. He said, "John, did you ever feel like all these expectations because you're the minister's kid?" And I didn't think anybody was looking at me. I was the 4th kid. Who cares about me, right? But I think sometimes people can feel like, I guess theoretically, if you're the child of a minister, people might have higher expectations. But I never felt that, and I'm glad I never felt it, because that would have, given me stress, right? So.
Well, and the other thing, John, is how about that? A lot of sons who grow up with fathers who are bigger than life, who are, these extraordinary figures. A lot of times it creates a different dynamic as a son to try to fill the shoes of your father, to be as good a man as your dad was. For instance, I mean, my dad was a vacuum cleaner salesman, and I'm, as a physician, I had all this, but I don't think I'd ever could be the man my father was, overcoming the obstacles he did, having as you talk about, the relationships, the way he treated people. I'm one of those people that says, I can never fill my dad's shoes. But how about you? Because your dad was such an extraordinary person.
I can tell you what we realized early on, that different people are destined for different things. So the first chapter in my book, I think it's called Wired at Birth, but it's about my brother, my older brother, who is just imbued with tremendous athleticism, like super coordinated. Plus, he worked his ass off, and he was an outstanding athlete, whether he was bowling or skiing or playing basketball or hitting a tennis ball. I mean, it's just amazing. And then there I was, his younger, taller, skinnier brother with asthma. We'd play on the same teams. I was 3 or 4 years later, and the coach would look at me and say, are you really Paul Chuck's brother? Like, same parents? Like, why are you not good? Anyway, so I realized early on that we're all just wired at birth, and our genetics set a certain ceiling and floor, and then our job is just to do our best within that bandwidth and stuff. So I've never, and the other thing is, my parents never had any expectations of any of us. Like, I don't think I ever received career or academic advice from either one of them. They never talked about how well you're doing in school, or we think you should do this. I felt like I was pretty much a free agent. I wanted to be a sports writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, a sporting green, which was literally mint green. But I read about this in the book. But in my senior year of English, I realized I wasn't even the best writer in a group of 30 high school students. So how could I possibly be a professional writer? The best writer in my high school class was Catherine Winks, who went on to write the authoritative textbook on lesbian sex. But anyway, so thank God I was exposed to Kathy Winks, and I realized, oh my God, I'm a horrible writer. And so that led to medicine, where you don't have to be really good at English or writing. It's just average.
Yeah, I remember that story, and I remember that story you told. And and I love that story though in the book about wired at birth. And you made the analogy with Roger Clemens, right? Or yeah, tell us about that. I like that.
Well, I think Roger Clemens said the quote is something idiotic like, you're going to do anything, if you try hard enough. Yeah, that's easy for Roger Clemens to say, right? Because he's Roger Clemens. I mean, he was born with great genetics and he worked hard at it. It's not that he worked hard. I think I once watched an interview with Barbara Walters or some evening show where, like, he could pinpoint exactly where he's going to throw the ball and he would just do it, right? Well, yeah, I mean, so Roger Clemens didn't understand that genetics set ceilings and floors. You see, because if everybody was a pluripotent, Roger Clemens, we would have a million LeBron Jameses, right? How many LeBron Jameses do we have? We have one. But I guarantee you that hundreds of thousands of kids have been sent to basketball camps and fed fancy diets and had psych coaches, mental health coaches to rise them to the level of LeBron James. But there's only one LeBron James. So, the reason why I wrote about that is because so many people suffer with the shame of feeling like they haven't met expectations. Like, oh my God, my parents invested so much in me. I went to this great school. How come I'm not this? Well, it's because you're limited. It's funny. My wife had a tennis coach. I'm sure he said it in a kind way, but he told her, Leslie, you might be limited by your athletic potential. Oh my God, which is a super funny, backhanded or cruel way of saying, yeah, like you don't have it within you genetically to be a great athlete. I mean, you could be a good one, if you keep practicing, but you're not Martina Navratilova. And yeah, and similarly, like even within medicine, like there are tons of, I mean, I was a family doctor. I like a lot of things, but there are tons of things I could not do in medicine. Like I just don't have the skill set to maybe be a neurosurgeon or the patience to be a psychiatrist or the academic aptitude to be a really good pathologist. But I sort of found my lane, right? I found my lane and I found a place where if I work hard, I could be decent in my arena, right? So that's one of the goals for young people is you're just trying to discover your strengths and weaknesses and then maybe find something that you could be good in with a little effort and achieve some sort of mastery and get some sort of, achievement and meaning. So it's an interesting adventure, right?
And and part of that is that they labor under these self-help gurus and everything. This mantra: you can do anything you want if you work hard.
If you just buy my video series, they're always trying to sell you something, right? So be wary. I just give my advice for free. I mean, the book does cost $19.95, but if you're super desperate and you need help, just email me and I'll send you a free one. But
I know I worked in a Kaiser area with a lot of minority kids, and these young kids would come in high school, and I'd say, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" They'd say something like, "I'm going to be a cornerback for the Oakland Raiders, defensive right cornerback." And I'd say, "That's great, but what about Plan B?" Right?
I never want to be the person to squash somebody's dreams. So when people tell me things like that, my reply is just like the other. That's fabulous. Keep working at it and have a plan B just in case that doesn't work out. You have a plan B, right? So just in case
you don't get that contract from the NBA there, maybe take a computer, maybe take some typing courses, Another reason why I really wanted to interview you, and one of the reasons why I have so much respect for you is that not only were you a leader in our mission at Kaiser, 10,000 doctors strong in our physician health and wellness meeting, and I've heard so many of your presentations, I've been to so many of the meetings that you chaired. Not only were these meetings and these presentations great presentations with a lot of information, but they were so entertaining. They were so engaging. Really, you have this magic in your presentations of just engaging the audience. I would put on, I'll tell you the truth, I don't think I ever told you this, but whenever we'd have one of our physician wellness meetings, I would get a notice, I'd put it on my calendar, and for weeks I'd look forward to that day because I knew that was going to be such a great day. Let me ask you this. Tell us, what are some of the techniques, strategies, secrets that you use to engage an audience?
Leading a medical practice is challenging. There can be reimbursement changes, referral slowdowns, staff turnover, or drama. There are obstacles in the way of achieving your goals, or maybe it feels like you've hit a plateau. Who can you turn to for help with the business of managing a medical practice? The Physician Growth Accelerator, a private practice partner that helps you uncover and overcome constraints in your practice. They will check your business vitals, identify the root cause of what's restricting your growth, prescribe what to do about it, and help you achieve it, just like we do with our patients. Imagine a practice, imagine your practice, where stress is reduced, profits increase in both patients and staff, and you are happier. They've been making that vision a reality for over a decade. Isn't it time your practice thrived? Discover how at physiciangrowthaccelerator.com.
First of all, Scott, I need to say that if our meetings was one of the highlights on your calendar, you need to get a better life. Okay. So, to be honest, I really look forward to our meetings too, but it had nothing to do with, I did a leadership class for a year. It is the American Leadership Forum. They have chapters nationwide. But anyway, one of the modules was on the flipped classroom. And they said, yeah, if you want to be a really effective teacher, you want to flip the classroom. You want to turn the audience into the instructors and the quote unquote teacher or leader. I mean, at most you're a facilitator. And if you think back on our regional meetings, the joy of the regional meetings is that there was full engagement by all the people, right? I mean, the regional meetings did not feature me. I mean, I opened them, I closed them, maybe a few goofy remarks in between. But really the stars of the meetings were the participants that came from all the medical centers like you, right? So my favorite part about the meeting was we called it round robin or something, but it's where everybody had their turn to get up and share, a best practice or a challenge they were having. And then they kind of put it out there to the group and they'd get feedback and stuff. And we'd all be furiously taking notes. And everybody would go home with this wonderful to-do list of like pearls from the practice of life, right? I mean, basically, what I try and do as a meeting facilitator and planner is, I mean, I did do a very little preparation, but like I would have some goals, like what are we trying to do? And for me, the main goal was full engagement and sharing of wisdom and knowledge of the participants. So that was the full goal. And then on occasion, I might have to have, a little bit of meetings before the meetings, call one or two people saying, in particular, I'd like to do this or that. But otherwise, I had full faith in the audience. And then if you're in that group and you come back time after time, you realize, oh my God, that is the standard. The standard is that these meetings are featuring us and the leader really cares about what we're going to say. And so everybody's on alert. Like you never come to the meeting thinking you're just going to sit on the sidelines and fall asleep because at some point you're going to be featured during the meeting, right? So you pay more attention. And then I think, what else? We would occasionally bring in, some outside talent because, we were good, but we realized we had our limits too. So occasionally we have to have like a guest speaker to kind of dress us up a little bit. But I would say the secret to effective meetings is the flipped classroom and making every participant fully engaged. And then the last thing I would say is that if you're going to have an in-person meeting, you don't want to waste all the time and energy and fossil fuels people invested in actually getting their butts into that room. You want to activate an in-person meeting. So you literally want people up on their feet. You want people dancing and chanting and, clapping. And so they're leveraging all the possibilities of gathering in person. Human beings by nature, we are people who like to congregate, gather, and tell stories. So as I think back in our regional meetings, what was it? It was a physical gathering where we told stories and listened generously to stories. And I think that's why you have this, this visceral, fond memory of it, because that was the not so secret formula. It was like the stone soup of meetings, right? Like John Chuck, I have self-respect, I have good self-image, but I don't bring a lot of things to the party, but I'm a good stone soup guy. I can come to the village and say, hey, would you like to contribute some stuff to my stone soup? I'll get the pot and I'll throw in my stone. I'll maybe even gather some fuel for a fire. But then, you're going to bring the carrots and the rutabaga and, hopefully some pork bones or whatever. And we're going to make a nice little broth together. And then we're going to celebrate it together. And it's going to be a blast because it's totally inclusive. It's totally a celebration of people working together for a cause bigger than themselves. And gosh, as I talk about this, I wish we could gather at the waterfront today and have Chia order another great parsley, cilantro-free meal and just go at it. Right?
No, I love those meetings. And you're right, the flipped classroom, we were all involved. And, when that, you talk about the round robin and boy, we would just steal from each other. People would have great, just steal shameless.
Yeah, they always teach in grammar school, don't, cheat or copy. But in adult life, oh my God, you should totally cheat and copy. I mean, Chip Heath at Stanford in his book, Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard, he talks about, people and groups always facing great challenges. And our responsibility is to either be a bright spot who's adapting, in superior ways, or to just survey the horizon for bright spots and copy them. That's our responsibility as leaders and human beings. Either you be a bright spot or you copy a bright spot. And we just help one another along the way.
And John, as you mentioned, going to, and as you consult with these organizations, that is the one thing when I've gone to these meetings at other places that I see the differences. We were there from, the ground up. Everybody in all the regional leaders brought in something to that stone soup, whereas so many times I see it's all top down. The leadership people sit there and they're.
Yeah, well, the whole top down, Sutton and Rao from Stanford wrote this great book called Scaling Up Excellence. And they said that there are many ways to lead, and they use this religious metaphor and stuff. And they say that, like, on one end, there's Catholicism, which is top down. Okay, it's like an air war. You're just dropping bombs, And then on the other end, I think they say it's Buddhism. It's from the ground up. You can't just have that because it's just too chaotic, and there's no standards or anything. And they said, the sweet spot in leadership and in followership, if there's such a word, is just right in the middle. You kind of set some guardrails, and it's not too top down. It's not too bottom up. It's somewhere in the middle. And you just agree on, some core values and culture. And then you move within that corridor. And I mean, that's how I think about it. And it's worked for me. But at the same time, you might set these boundaries, and some people want to dance outside of them. And you just have to. And, you don't want to get mad at them. You just want to get curious, right? That's what they always teach us in medicine, right? Patient says something or demands something. Don't get mad at them. I mean, they're just a person trying to lead their best life. Just get curious about why they believe. One of the best questions my dad would ask people is, what are your convictions? Which is important, right? Like, what do you believe in? But more importantly, how did you come to hold them? How did you come to hold that, what I perceive to be a crazy belief, right? Like, tell me more about that. I'm truly interested. Maybe I can learn from you, right? Because you seem to be very invested in that emotionally and whatever. So yeah, I've learned a lot by being curious, not mad.
Right. Yeah, I think the mantra they say is get curious, not furious. And God, I love the way you're.
Oh yeah, that's even better. See that? Yeah. And by the way, your book is written in such a storytelling, wonderful language with little vignettes that you feel like you're there. So.
And speaking of engaging the audience, I mean, I remember in some of your presentations, you'd be going, hey, everybody stand up, give yourself a hand. You're all doing this, you're all doing that. And then you take a group picture. You'd stand up on stage, take a group picture, and everybody, and then you send us the group picture, and we're all saying, man, we're part of this group. It's like just so many things you did that just engaged everybody.
And it's free. It's free, right? Yeah, I mean, take a whole bunch of pictures, make a photo collage, put a little title to it, and just send it out. It's free, right? And it's liberating. It builds esprit de corps. It's simple, but it's a best practice, and it's simple, but that doesn't mean that we practice it regularly. So the other thing is, I'm just a product of my environment. I can't remember exactly, but I probably saw that behavior in somebody who I admired. I had a mentor who probably celebrated people and would sort of, probably in the old days, that they would write something. But for me, I have an iPhone and I can text. So there are ups and downsides to technology. But one of the upsides to technology, because I'm a visual storytelling person, I love sending images via text. Like I maintain a lot of very deep relationships with people who I already know in person. If you already know somebody in person, you have a great deep relationship, then technology is a great way to supplement that. But if you don't actually know somebody, I like those relationships that are purely technical, maybe not as deep as I'd like relationships to be. But yeah, you just have to, you can't fight change like technology. And now we have AI. You can't fight that stuff, but you have to just maybe use it in ways that you think are responsible and productive and pay respect to human beings and how we think and act, right? So,
John, let's move on, I just want to talk about your book a little bit. It's called Pearls from the Practice of Life, A Family Physician's Guide to Struggling Less and Thriving More. And in this book, there's a lot of different vignettes about people who have learned to struggle less and thrive more. And these are pearls from the practice of life, really, from your observations of being a family physician all those years. I think there's 69, right? 69 different chapters. And gosh, I like so many of them. Let me ask you about this one. What are the lessons of golf? I know you're a golfer, so what are the lessons?
I don't think I wrote about it. So basically, when I told it took me 6 months to write the book. I mean, it was just very spotty writing here and there because they're all very short chapters. And when I was done, I said to my wife, honey, I'm done. I got 69 chapters. I'm ready to publish. And she looked at me and she said, 69? You can't publish with 69. You can't use that number and stuff. And I said, Isn't that a good number? Why is that a bad? Anyway, so I spent about 3 or 4 days trying to write a 70th chapter. And the chapter was going to be how golf is the best metaphor for life. Okay. So many things about it. Okay. Right. Like every hole's a new hole. You might triple bogey something, but on the next hole, you might get a birdie. Every hole's a new hole. And then there's so many, seeming paradoxes, contradictions. Like if you swing easier, the ball goes further. If you swing down on the ball, it goes further up in the air, all these things. Right. And the other thing about golf, I don't know if it's a sport, but it's an activity for a lifetime and it's multi-generational. So one of the greatest moments in my life was playing 18 holes of golf in Hawaii with my late father-in-law, Alan, and my two kids, Tyler and Kelly. Like that was just a wonderful moment in life for me. So anyway, I tried to write that chapter. It didn't rise to the level of the other 69, so it's not in there, but I play golf and I do think it's, of all the fun activities I do, it is the best metaphor for life. It teaches me how to be a better person. It teaches me how to, not hurl clubs down the fairway. It teaches me to be courteous and respectful of other people. It's good. I think in the old days, they used to interview people for jobs on the golf course because, it really tests multiple elements of your personality and perspectives and behavior. But yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm not a golfer myself, but from people I talk to, they say the one thing it teaches you humility.
Yeah, well, as a guy who sat on the bench for his high school basketball team, I already had humility. But the reason I enjoy golf, and this is a great tip for those of you who are frustrated in golf. I mean, I try my best and, I occasionally practice and stuff, but you just have to modify your expectations. Like you're not a pro golfer. This is something you're doing for fun. So I have very realistic expectations for my golf game. So I always have a good time. I always have a good time because I'm mostly enjoying just being in fellowship with my good friends. I don't ever golf for business. That is no fun. Like that's yucky because that takes all the fun out of golf. And then talking about this is making me want to go play, actually.
I often wondered about that business golf thing. I mean, Stanford offers a course in business golf. I've talked to people who've done this, and I say, well, what do you do? Let's say you're taking a client out to the golf course. Do you lose to them automatically to make them feel good, or do you play your best, or what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you're supposed to do, but basically, if you're trying to win them over, no matter what they do, you say, great shot, I don't know. Wow, you're super good. Yeah. How'd you get to be so good?
That's right. You had a chapter in there called Foxhole Mantras. And I really loved the story of Jack and Judy. I think Jack was the husband. And can you tell us that story? It resonated so much.
Jack was a patient of mine who basically he was depressed. Okay. I would say many of the external measures of his life were positive, but he had organic mood disorder and saw life through a certain lens. Okay. That being said, while he was sort of down on himself, when you talk to Judy, about how Jack was in their social life, he was extremely complimentary of other people and supportive of other people, always telling them, hey, you're doing a great job, or how'd you do that so well? Despite the fact that his self-image was not so good. So I think my conclusion in that chapter was what Jack said was, you don't have to feel good to do good, right? Some of us are sort of crippled by the fact that, well, I can't do good things for other people. I'm not doing so well myself, right? But Jack somehow, despite his deep depression, overcame that and was a blessing in the lives of others. And it makes me think, I think I also wrote about the Book of Joy by Doug Abrams. He spent 5 days with the Dalai Lama and Bishop Desmond Tutu, and he wrote this book called The Book of Joy. And he says, I heard him speak live at the Mondavi Center, and he's just a wonderful speaker. And he said, I learned so much from these two, heroes of humanity. And let me tell you something about joy. He says, joy is not the same as happiness. Happiness is just a conditional thing. Like, oh, I got a raise, my child got into prep school, whatever, I'm happy. But joy is a choice, okay? And the other thing he said, joy is not the absence of suffering. Joy and suffering are just two sides of the same coin, and that coin is called life. But the best thing that Doug Abrams learned from these two heroes is that the greatest joy is bringing joy to others, regardless of whether you have it yourself. And, the bishop and the Dalai Lama, objects of great persecution and everything. Yeah, I'm sure that they weren't always feeling good, but they just made this decision that it was a choice, right? Choice is destiny. That they made a choice to bring joy to others regardless of what was going on in their own lives. And I think that those of us who can rally and muster that energy and that intention, I think that's a very positive adaptation and something that I think a lot of human beings could do well by making that a part of the blueprint of how they live their lives. So yeah, Jack and Judy, a real inspiration to me, because the majority of my patients who are deeply depressed were not blessing the lives of others. They were just crippled, right? And I would probably be in that camp. And the reason I wrote about Jack was because he rose above and beyond that. I'm not saying that all people can do that, and you shouldn't feel bad about yourself if you can't. Actively, intentionally helping others has tremendous benefits for you. It's sort of like, and the other thing is, this is life relationship advice, whether or not people are looking for that on your podcast. But, sometimes we're struggling to find a great life partner. If you're struggling to find a great life partner, you should go volunteer to do something. Like go volunteer to help handicapped kids go bowling, right? Because you know why? The only other people volunteering to do that are kind, generous people. And that's the kind of person you want to link up with in life, right? So,
John, you just froze for a second, but I love that. I love that mantra from Jack. You don't have to feel good to do good. It's really so true. So many people say to themselves, oh, wait, let me fix myself. Let me just feel a little bit better. And then I'll do this and then I'll do that. But that is just such a real pearl of wisdom for life. You don't have to.
Yeah, and it's something that I didn't know, and I never read about it. I just saw it lived out in the life of this patient. And that's what a lot of the stories are about.
Let me ask you one more thing about the book. I love the story or the concept of the Minga, especially in this time we're in. Can you tell the audience what the Minga is?
Yeah, so I think it's in South America, and I think it's from the book From Me to We and stuff. But a Minga, like in a lot of communities, relatively underdeveloped communities, they don't have contractors and stuff to build homes. They just have people. They can rally people. So what they'll do in a community is they'll have a Mingo where everybody in the village will gather to help somebody build their hut. And there's reciprocity in that. Like if you help me at my Minga, I'll help you at your Minga and stuff. And I feel like there's a sociologist at the University of Chicago, Professor Schweter, who talks about the three main buckets of ethics and values. And he says, there's the one bucket of autonomy, and actually in the West, we're to the left of that. We're into hyper-individualism, right? We're beyond autonomy. It's so horrible. The next bucket is that of community. And I think Japan there are people grow up as individuals in Japan, but they really exist for the greater good of the country of Japan. And then in the last bucket is the values and ethics and virtues of divinity. And these are people who believe that the Holy Spirit is working with them to do greater good for a loving God. But anyway, the Minga thing is really about that whole ethics and values of community. And I think that in the Western world, we could use more of that. There's this epidemic of loneliness, right, that is plaguing our society. And I think the answer to loneliness is connection. And connection is all about community. So I think that's pretty important pearl from the book. And I see that, you and I have seen that play out in so many patients' lives and in the lives of our colleagues and friends and stuff, right? Those people who are connected to other people tend to be more well than those are disconnected. And there are many reasons people are disconnected. There are mental health issues, there are genetic issues, there are, issues related to their upbringing. But that does work for some people, for many people, to get connected to other people. That's called your social life. And it's a very important part of your life.
I think we're going to have to wrap up now, but I want to ask you one more thing, because in this story in your book, it seems to me kind of really puts together a lot of your thinking. And this was the wisdom that you found getting on an elevator in the Redwood City Kaiser Hospital. So there was a poster in the elevator. And in a way, I love this story because I think it summarizes so much your outlook on life. Tell us about that elevator experience.
Yeah, I had finished giving a talk at Kaiser Redwood City. It was a decent talk. It was in the basement level. I think some people from Stanford Wellness came up to listen to it. It's a good time. And then I was leaving the lecture room and trying to get out and drive home. But I was standing in front of the elevators, and I looked up to my left, and hanging from the ceiling was this sign, and it said, and it was stacked from top to bottom. It said birth certificates on the top, and then it was decedent affairs, right below that. And then there's arrow pointing down the hall to the right. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that encapsulates what life is about. So like on top, it says birth certificates, right? And then above that is just eternity, right? So way before you were born, there is, the whole history of mankind, and then you're born. And then decedent affairs, and then there's everything below that, okay, which life after you're gone. And then that tiny little space, I mean, it may be a 12 font space with the arrow going to the right. That's your life. Like your little piece of the pie in the history of mankind and the future of mankind is this tiny little wedge. And it's all happening down the hall to the right, right? Like, so the take home, it was a profound moment for me. And I thought, it's a pretty tiny slice. And it sort of affirmed in me what I already had, which was a sense of urgency about getting things done now. It was an affirmation and validation of this deeply held belief I have, which is that you don't have forever to do this, right? You're born and you die. There are only a few breaths and heartbeats in between. So don't waste this precious time you have. Live each day fully. I think one of the things I say in the book is, based on everything I've seen in life, I've learned about life, I've seen it play out in patients' lives, in my own life. I floss my teeth, I max out my retirement account, and I wear a seatbelt. Beyond that, I live each and every day as if it could be my last, because it could. I mean, statistically, you and I probably have good years ahead of us. We're one car accident away. We're one widowmaker, malignant arrhythmia away. We're one pulmonary embolus away from no longer being in the land of the living. And I think in the little prep exchange we had, you said you might have me, read my little comment about death. You want me to read my comment about death?
And, and this goes and talk that elevator, wisdom that you had. It just goes back to what Dad said. Dad said that the sad thing about life is not that you die, but that you waste the time that you have on earth.
Yeah. These are the bookends. The bookends are your birth certificate and your decedent affairs and your death certificate, right? Those are the bookends. And the space in between the bookends, it's not vast. It's tiny. That little threshold from living to death is very tenuous, very tenuous. As a physician, you know the tens of millions of things that have to be going right for both of us to even sustain life during this podcast recording, right? I mean, it's a miracle that we're going to make it to the end of this recording because so many things are going right to keep it that way.
Yeah. And John, in your book, you did have that. That was the most, impactful kind of description of death I think I've ever heard. If you could go back to your book and share that with us.
So I think this short paragraph I'm going to read, it's preceded by me describing the first time I had to pronounce somebody dead as an intern. It was on the East 8 ward at UC Davis, which is a med surg. I was on call overnight, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I had to go and pronounce a patient dead and stuff. To just sit back and to have that huge responsibility, and then to observe the stillness and lifelessness of this person who just minutes earlier had been in the land of the living. So this is what I wrote, and hopefully this is the part that you're interested in. It says, regardless of the details, the end result was always the same. The beating heart and warm, moist breath of a living being ceased, and in the cases of those who made it past childhood, a human being who was once walking, talking, working, laughing, singing, eating, and loving, crossed over a one-way threshold to a new state of stillness and quiet, never again to smile, offer a kind word, return a warm embrace, or attend a gathering of family and friends. No more wrapping or opening presents, writing or reading letters, sharing inside jokes, taking out Chinese food, enjoying a hot dog and peanuts at a baseball game, building sandcastles at the beach, or planting bulbs and waiting for them to bloom. I mean, hopefully people don't need more motivation than that to just be your best self today. Do your best. And your best is not the same as somebody else's best, right? Given the floor and the ceilings that life has given you, just do your best within it.
And it makes you want to treasure those moments that you're eating a hot dog and peanuts at a baseball game. And
at an A's game in particular. Yes, because I know you're a huge A's fan, right? We should probably get to a game together this season before they move to Sacramento and then to some god-awful different state. But anyway.
John, anything else that I didn't ask you or anything you'd like to the interview?
I think the only other thing I'd like to say is I love you, Scott Abramson. My life has been blessed by you. We work together for a cause greater than ourselves at Kaiser Permanente. We shared a lot of, laughs and stuff over decades, and it's my privilege to call you colleague and friend, and I've really enjoyed this time together.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for sharing your wisdom and for sharing your story and the story of your family, your insights. And truly, I think you have shared pearls in the practice of life. Thank you, John.
Doctors dedicate our lives to caring for others. It's time someone took care of us. Visit patternlife.com to simplify your path to peace of mind. Patternlife.com, simplifying your insurance journey. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it, or like it, or comment on a social media post, or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.